Good. I still do. And actually, my title, presentation title, was supposed to be simpler, but Paul likes complicated, so he suggested to change it a bit. So, but anyway, and yeah, that's something that I was realizing, that this is a presentation where the word food appears, and it is just before lunch, and I really can reassure that this is not going to stimulate your appetites. So let's start. My aim today is to present methodological innovation for interdisciplinary research, the adaptation of Aldroy and Noah polyocular framework for wicked problems. Before we get to that, I'd like to say a few words about the images on this slide, which run through the whole presentation. The round object stands for the phenomenon, in my case, food confusion, while the spotlight represents a disciplinary perspective. Oh, sorry, because I just because I can't see what I have there. Sorry, how can I? Okay. And as you can see, the spotlight illuminates one side of the phenomenon, leaving the other side in shadow. This imagery works as a concise analogy of the perspectivist stance underpinning the study, aligned with Geer's scientific objective relativism, holding that knowledge is always from a situated vantage point, and it connects to Dilly's semiotic realism, especially the notion of supersubjectivity, recognizing relation as ontologically real, whether or not epistemically accessed. It also converges with Cobbli's principle of that biosemiotics can help shed light on cultural practices rooted in physical needs, such as the identification of food. With that in mind, I'll now walk you through the journey that led me to this adaptation, which I think is essential for making sense of this adaptation. I've broken this journey into 5 stages, which I have somewhat arbitrarily named prehistory, emergent, position, you can see a little marketing here, turning point, and interdisciplinary phase. What I call it prehistory was the phase of navigating everyday food messages. The phenomenon outside any systematic investigation appeared vague, fragmentary, and nameless. Peirce would call that a sinoscopic sphere of experience, common observations, distinct from the specialized idioscopic inquiry. From my standpoint as a layperson at this stage, my food knowledge was largely heritage-based and casual, with only a bit of nutrition science and some ethical concerns. The trigger to look deeper into food choice was a desire to make better choice about food, which led me to study nutrition science formally. But where I expected to find clarity, I found contradictions, especially in key terms like carbohydrates, fats, or cholesterol, good in one context, yet bad in another, revealing how nutritional language fractures in its semantic value. This phase illustrates that even without intention to do research, my attempt to make sense of contradictions around food were already an encounter with a real phenomenon consisting of entities and conditions that exist in, whether acknowledged or not. Such relata, Dilly would argue, are ontologically real, a part of the fabric of the world, but enter awareness only when brought into relation through semiosis. In this sense, my personal drive to act responsibly became an epistemic doorway into an already structured semiotic reality. Seen this way, the layperson's path from lived disruption to conscious naming of the phenomenon is not fabrication, but uncovering. That brings me to the next slide. In this phase, the term food confusion already widely circulating in media, popular book, online resources, and everyday conversation, gave a name to what I had been experiencing, the tangle of conflicting and often contradictory food messages. Recognizing my own observations in the way the term was used, I saw that adopting it would anchor my quest in a language already familiar to the public, making the phenomenon more relatable and communicable. Moreover, I noticed that the term was not just describing those contradictions. Through its repeated use, it was actively molding public understanding of the problem, consolidating itself into a shared, recognizable label. Consistent with Dilly's theory, the phenomenon's relational reality was there all along, but at this stage, it began to take clearer contours. The label crystallized it, turning a diffuse, ill-defined experience into something that could be discussed and examined more systematically. At this stage, the phenomenon linked to the term food confusion with a strong legacy is reversed into a research project, my initial PhD proposal. In Persian vocabulary, an idioscopic move, the phenomenon was now closely examined through specialized observation within a field of inquiry. In my case, it was framed through the lens of nutrition science, reflecting the context in which I had most frequently encountered and heard defined, with the confusion occurring at the level of nutrient words and their polysemic value. For example, carbohydrates being good and bad at the same time. This positioning resonated with my background in linguistic, nutrition science, and the recent marketing qualification pursued to understand its role in generating confusion, making it a logical starting point for research. So while nutrition science was my main frame of analysis, I also drew on inputs from other disciplines. Lexical, semantic, and marketing offered contrasting framings of the same object of study. From a shared analytical angle, they contribute supplementary interpretative domains, illustrating how meaning changes across context and exposing tension between communicative settings. This shows how one disciplinary lens can brightly illuminate certain aspects of a phenomenon, while inevitably leaving others in shadow. After appreciating how food-related confusion, when viewed solely through the lens of human nutrition science, can be framed at the level of polysemic nutrient terms, another realization emerged. This time, from detecting instances of food confusion in realms far removed from nutrition science and its terminology. Humans are not alone in experiencing confusion around food. Animals, for instance, may take non-nutrient waste for food, like turtle mistaking plastic bag for jellyfish. The same appears at microbial and cellular levels. For instance, sweet-tasting compounds, like artificial sweeteners, can act as false signals, prompting metabolic responses as if genuine energy was present. This multi-scale misidentification called for a biosemiotic framing. Food is a fundamental epistemic object in biology, constituted through sign-mediated interpretation across vegetable, microbial and cellular, sensory, animal, and cultural human semiosis, and recognizing a cool tripartite model, all simultaneously operative within human biological complexity. In other words, this biosemiotic pivot rests on two insights. One, confusion about food is not uniquely human. It spans all life forms. And in humans, whose scaffolded interpretative mechanisms parallel those in other organisms, food identification is not purely symbolic or abstract, as nutrition science lens might suggest, but is distributed across layers of semiosis, from molecular to sensory to symbolic. Together, those insights support Cobley's principle that biosemiotic is very well positioned to look at all other disciplines, feeding directly to shed light on a phenomenon from other disciplines, feeding directly into my research question, how can a biosemiotic perspective shed light on food confusion? Building on these pivots, the next step was to look more closely at what different disciplines actually offer. Each shed light on a specific facet of food confusion, be it at cellular, sensory, or cultural level. Crucially, each insight is inseparable from the lens that produced it, shaped by field concept, methods, and way of framing what counts as food. If the aim is to illuminate the phenomenon as fully as possible, those lights can not just be merged into an ad hoc blend, as in my early nutrition focus. That would blur the distinctive outline each perspective brings and risk losing the very features that make them valuable. Preserving them in their integrity allows to see clearly not only what each discipline reveals, but also where the blind spots are. This matters because my research is not about leaping to a solution. It is about shedding light. And the more angles from which the object is illuminated, the sharper the description. Perhaps worth highlighting at this point that precise descriptions are the foundation of any inquiry. They provide a stable ground on which explanations can be built and later solutions explored. The challenge then is to integrate those illuminations so that they can preserve the specificity while collectively revealing a more complete picture. Meeting the challenge calls for a structural tool, one designed to bring different lights into focus without dimming their distinct strength. This is where the polyocular frameworks comes in. The Polyocular Framework for Wicked Problem by Alroy and Noyes, 2014, is both a methodological tool and, for its profound philosophical grounding, a reorientation of interdisciplinary research aimed at complex issue with no clear solution, the wicked problems. At this base, it draws from Kant's think in itself, carried forward through Pearson's distinction between immediate and dynamical object. The immediate object is how something appears within a science system, including how it is observed and represented within a given disciplinary standpoint, partial, constructed, and perspective bound. For example, a cow seen by an economist is a farm asset. The same cow seen by a veterinarian is an animal with physiological needs. Both accounts are valid, but both are partial. The dynamical object is the real but never fully accessible object those partial views point towards, not unknowable in the strict Kantian sense. It can only be approached indirectly as a limiting case, setting the conditions within which perspectives form partial representation. The actual cow in the world, with its biological, ecological, economical, and cultural dimensions, embodies more than any single perspective can capture. From this, the author has sent through constructivism, perspectivism, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And biosemiotic. Can't I just scroll down? Anyway, since every perspective carries the marks of its cognitive system, to argue that wicked problem can only be addressed by combining partial perspectives. The polyocular logic, is there a way I can, okay, sorry. So the polyocular logic springs from Bateson's simple idea: two eyes create depth, whereas one eye alone cannot. This leads to Mariana's concept of polyocular vision, where multiple views add entirely new dimension to understanding. In short, multiple disciplinary perspectives can augment grasp, but their integration must not flatten differences into a single reductionist lens. It must preserve their integrity, allowing the complementary angle to remain visible, something the framework enables through its second-order disposition, observing not the world directly, but the observation made from different perspectives, coordinated around a shared dynamical object. By safeguarding each viewpoint, the framework maintains a depth of insight and aligns perspective with one another's blind spot, so that a mosaic of partial views is transformed into a richer coordinated picture. This vision metaphor also fits the spotlight and sphere analogy used so far. Both the eye and the spotlight are perspectival instrument. Each reveals what falls within its angle while leaving the rest unseen. And in both cases, it is through the combination of effects that facets otherwise invisible are made visible. So this is the best tool, the methodological tool, seen to shed maximum light on a phenomenon, so that all perspective can be combined. There is, however, a problem that justifies my adaptation. Roy and Noy's polyocular framework is designed for interdisciplinary team-solving wicked problems collaboratively. But my study is first conducted by a single researcher and second focused on describing a wicked problem, not solving it. Unlike a solo researcher, interdisciplinary teams can draw disciplinary competence from internal perspective holders and enabling knowledge production from within their respective domains. Moreover, the solution-oriented scope naturally fits such teams due to the generative dynamics and perspective-specific capability typical of collaborative goal-oriented research. In contrast, my individually led study is not concerned with solving a wicked problem, but with describing and mapping it to lay the groundwork for a more encompassing understanding of it. So the key challenge has been, how can a solution-oriented team-based framework be meaningfully adapted into a solo descriptive research project without compromising its epistemological integrity? The adaptation challenge was not solved from scratch. Part of the answer was already present in Alro and Noy's own text. Their discussion does not stop at practical collaboration. It insists on the perspectival nature of knowledge and the need to preserve the identity of each disciplinary stance when coordinating perspective. This emphasis on partiality, blind spots, and value of second-order observation, articulated in the 5 principles for polyocular research, opened the door for an adaptation that could remain faithful to the framework's epistemological integrity. Thus, in the adaptation, the implementation stops at the descriptive stage without advancing into the solution-oriented phases envisaged by the authors. From this bedrock, I extended their proposal further. My study could not rely on internal perspective holders, but it could simulate that plurality by engaging rigorously with the ontological, epistemological, and methodological foundation of each discipline. In practice, this meant turning the framework's emphasis on perspectival identity into a systematic inquiry able to reconstruct how each discipline frames food confusion, allowing within the scope of a solo study to illuminate the phenomena of food confusion as fully as possible. This led me to develop a stepwise process for observing observation outlined in the next slide. Just wondering if I can move this, I'm sorry. Okay, this visual lays out in one sequence the working steps of my adaptation. The cube represents the paradigmatic space of a discipline where assumptions about reality and knowledge set the condition for how food confusion is framed and investigated. The first step is semantic structures, how a distinctive discipline defines and talks about food confusion. For example, anthropology, cultural semiotics described it as confusion, sociology as gastroanomie, and physiology in terms of signaling disruption, like endocrine disruption, molecular mimicry, or fast signaling, where exogenous compounds mislead the body's nutrients sensing mechanism. Each of those terms provide the entry point into a discipline's particular way of making sense of the problem. The second step is ontological and epistemological commitments. What is it assumed to exist, and what counts as valid knowledge frame how food confusion can be recognized in that space. The third step is a methodological commitment. The investigative tools that flow from those commitments, ethnography, surveys, experiment modeling, which determine the aspect of the phenomenon illuminated and how. The fourth step moves outside the cube to a meta-level comparison, holding the illuminated facets together without collapsing them into one. My task as a solo researcher is to compare those framings at a second order level, preserving their integrity while making their relations visible. This is how the adaptation plays out in practice. As a solo researcher, I had to simulate team-based vantage point and apply them descriptively. Notwithstanding the different ways the term food confusion has been used in the literature, the starting point is that food confusion equals disruptions occurring during the process of identification of edibility by any living system. This biosemiotic baseline that nourishment is always sign-mediated and susceptible to misinterpretation guides how I retooled the polyoker framework to shed more light on the phenomenon. In my research, I focused on 9 disciplines selected because they yielded many significant instances of food confusion in my review of the literature. What I show here is not the full range, but just a few examples enough to sketch characterizing feature. So observing observation, I began to reconstruct by reconstructing how disciplines observe food confusion. Anthropology as cultural negotiation of edibility, marketing as misinterpretation of commercial messages, ethology as animals mistaking non-nourishing nutritive matter for food, physiology as receptor level misreading of nutrient signals. Each of those counts as partial observation of observations, yet together they begin to outline the contours of the phenomenon. Step 2, exposing ontological epistemological commitments, asking what counts asking what assumption about reality and knowledge underpin each discipline, framing food confusion. No, sorry, this one I already saw this. Sorry. Sorry. I'm afraid to, yeah, because I'm afraid that there is no time. Sorry. Right. I mean, I'm at pretty much at the last one. I'm sorry. Yes. I have just another one. Okay. Here. Okay, well, the methodology framework is basically how the methodology shapes, it's the spotlight, basically. So it's the way the phenomenon is illuminated. In the step 4, the meta-level comparison, finally, I created meta-level translation to relate those framings without collapsing them into one. Here it's called Kuhl's semiotic threshold zones proved instrumental, enabling to situate confusion at cultural, symbolic, mapped, for instance, by ontology and marketing, animal sensory mapped by ethology, and vegetative cellular level mapped by physiology. And this obviously moves beyond the traditional idea of food confusion as a problem of nutrition science illiteracy into a more comprehensible understanding of this phenomenon in biosemiotic terms. Okay, so now the last slide, if I manage to get there. Sorry, I don't know why it's not moving. Oh my God, sorry. Jeez. Okay. Maybe. Thank you. I'm going now to the last slide, so. Okay, thanks. So finally, I would like to reflect on the limitation and benefits of this adapted use of the polyoker framework, what falls away, but also what becomes possible. Beside the obvious structural limits, one researcher can't do what a team of experts can. The real difficulty lies in the rigor this approach demands. Entering each discipline means spending assumption and painstakingly reconstructing its ontological, epistemological, and methodological commitment, since the material for such reconstruction are rarely consolidated consolidated in one source, but scattered across many studies. Plus, the result is a kind of midway that never superficial, but never fully expert, and still liable to look like a generalization when judged from within any discipline. And yet the benefits are striking. Retooling makes the framework workable in today's research economy, where most projects are carried out by individual or small cluster, with large collaboration are costly to found, organize, and sustain. For descriptive work particularly, it provides a way to map how different disciplines frame a phenomenon without the heavy machinery of big teams. This avoids premature reductionism, guards against eclecticism, and lays a descriptive groundwork for larger teams where they can later scale up. In some, while interdisciplinary collaboration teams remain the gold standard for solution-oriented work, they are rarely feasible for the descriptive projects. Retooling the polyocre framework for single researcher use offers clear advantages. It enables rigorous comparative work under realistic condition and ensure that the complexity of phenomena like food confusion are not overlooked. And in short, this adaptation is not a second best compromise, but a genuine methodological contribution, a reliable compass for descriptive research on complex problems. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes. That's right. So yes, I will take from that, but I also want to link with the previous panels just to say the one thing that yes, biosemiotics, but biosemiotics is really the disciplinary perspective, the theoretical perspective that really talks to all the sciences. It can talk to the humanities, to the social sciences, to the hard sciences, all of them. And it is a very, very powerful tool. And as Spider-Man taught us, with big power comes big responsibility. So yes, within marketing, and yes, money makes the world go round, but yes, it has to be used for the good reason, because I mean, I know marketing and things can go a different way. Now, back to the question. What I meant to do and what I try to convey through this, journey, showing the journey, saying that actually there was something there. And to me, this is something that could respond, for example, to what they've been doing with, this trying to analyze the science to identify early signs of Parkinson or other similar disease. Is there something behind the sign? Okay, yes, so we can interpret a sign and decide that perhaps that sign means something else. We can decide that the red light or the, means that we have to go, but no, that's arbitrary. So, but we can, I heard, for example, in terms of animal communication, that the scream of a pig slaughtered, which to me communicates distress, does not. I mean, honestly, how can we interpret it otherwise, an animal that is losing its life? Anyway, so we can interpret things in different ways, but there is definitely something tangible there if we dissociate the fact, what is factual, from what it represents, what it relates us to that fact. Then we put ourselves in the condition of living in a world where you can believe anything you want. You can believe that, yes, the earth is flat, that the man hasn't been on the moon. That's kind of things, because that is exactly what post-truth does if everything is extreme relativism and there is a lot of philosophical underpinning, philosophy of science, and that kind of risk. What I wanted to say is that that phenomenon was there. I encountered it casually at the beginning, had personal reason to, and then it became slowly a phenomenon that becomes an object of studies, and after it becomes susceptible to certain illumination from discipline. And then through biosemiotic and get by, indeed, there is something out there, and there are turtles eating plastic bags and other things like that, that really put us in front of a world to confront biosemiotically. But thank you for the question.